Good morning. We're learning the Maamar Lecha Amar Libi in the Sefer Maamar Mulkotim that we use, and Moshe sent out a WhatsApp of the pages. If you don't have it, maybe Moshe could send it to you as we learn. We're learning this Maamar because it's preparation for Rosh Hashanah. It's Chodesh Elul. Everyone knows the importance of the month. The Melech is Basada, the king is here, whether we like it or not. He's in the field, he's in our house. All he wants of us is to come greet him. If you're lazy and you stay home and you don't go out to meet the king in the field, you haven't met the king in the field. And if you haven't met the king in the field, you lost an opportunity. So Chodesh Elul is the time when the Alter Rebbe says, and the Frierdiker Rebbe brings in different discourses, the Melech is Basada. So one of the other things that we do during Elul, we say Psalm 27, Tehillim Kapitel Chav Zayin, the David HaMelech says in the middle of the kapitel, it's David Hashem Oiri, and the middle of the kapitel is the Pasuk Lecha Amar Libi, Akshas Panecha Avaya Vakish. The Pasuk means that the heart of the Jew says to the Jew, search for God, and David says, I search for God. The Rashi says, this is a mission that God gives the heart to talk to the person to, search for me. And the Rebbe asks two questions. What does that mean? And then he begins explaining the concept that the Mipsari Echzeleka, and as I've said, this is a staple in Chabad Chassidus. It's a pasuk in Tanakh, but Chabad Chassidus uses it to show its approach. What is its approach? We need to perceive God from our flesh. If we understand God and we understand Him, God, well, but we don't see it through our flesh, something is still lacking. And this Chassidus spends all of its time how to make godliness, how to make divinity real in our life. And in this Maamar in particular, the Rebbe really elaborated on that. There's two types of perception. There's intellectual perception, which we call Re'iyah Sichlit, right, intellectual seeing, and there is Re'iyah Muchashit, tangible, physical seeing. There is practical seeing, meaning that you see it's light outside now. Even if you don't have the understanding what light is and how light works and what darkness is, just look outside and you see light. So this is called Re'iyah Muchashit. The Rebbe says, the pasuk says, Umipsari Echzeleka, which seems to be initially a contradiction. Because if you're talking about divinity, godliness is more ruchnius, more spiritual, right? And yet the verse says, Umipsari, you should see God from your flesh. How the flesh sees food, it sees sleeping, it sees giving tzedakah, it sees visiting someone in a hospital who's not well. Those are physical things, but godliness, ruchnius. So then he retorted, he answered his question by saying, well, that's why it doesn't say mipsari ere elokus. The word in Hebrew for seeing is re'iyah. So the Rebbe says the fact that the Navi doesn't use the word mipsari Elikus, from my flesh I will see clearly godliness, but rather the Aramaic word echzer, which means vision in Aramaic, meaning that the vision is not as clear. And that's why the word echzer was chosen and not ere, because godliness, divinity, you can't see tangibly. And the Rebbe says, I don't buy that argument. Sorry. It's true. Our perception is not as clear as we actually see something, but the objective is to get to a state of re'iyah. And the Rebbe says, how is that? That's the question now. How do we accomplish seeing God, seeing Elikus, divinity in the physical world? And the answer that he gave here at the end of page 9, the end of the first place over here, is through hashgacha u'kamoy, the last line, u'kamoy be'inyim hashgacha protis sheroyim elikus bemuchish. Seeing what we call HP, capital H, capital P, hashgacha protit, divine providence in your life and in the world around you. This is ro'im elokus iser, not exelokis. This is a roa experience bimuchash. So when you miss your bus or your train or your car ride or your plane ride, and then you hear that this and this happened, that the ba 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 ba, you say, what hashgacha protis? And that's something, that's obvious to everyone that hears about it or knows about it. But it's in the small things of life that everyday occurrences, we need to train ourselves with a fine eye that it's hashgacha protis. I told you when we would drive, with the children on the freeways and all that, and there was traffic, and I got a little impatient and nervous, and it's hot and it's long, and my wife would say, it's hashgacha protis, and she would train the kids. That's the time to say it's hashgacha protis, that you're stuck in traffic. Specifically when you're impatient and you're nervous and you're tired and you're hot and the kids are screaming and the babies are going nuts, and you say, let me get out of here, this mess. And you can't. Or another time, I remember I was driving I was in a car with a group of people driving to Hebron, to the Machpelah, and it was a winter, January, February, and it was snowing. And we were stuck in traffic, and guess who was all around us? Not yarmulkes and beards, but our wonderful cousins, And you can't go anywhere. You're lucky if your car doesn't break down. It's hashgacha protis. So this, the Rebbe says, is seeing godliness b'muchash. Very tangible, very real. So the reason why Moshe says echzeh and not ere is because how do you understand? Who says it's hashgacha protis? The mind. It's the mind. The re'iyah sichlit, the intellectual understanding of the situation says it's hashgacha protis. But tangibly, I'm stuck in traffic with enemies all around me. So that's why it says echzelka. Let's go on now to page 10. The explanation further in Ksiv. Nase Adam b'tzalmeinu kitmuseinu. It says in Parshas Braces, man was made in the image, in the gestalt of God. Our gestalt, our image. The Adam shelemata, man below, nivra b'tzelem udmus. B'tzelem udmus Adam Elyon is created in the image and in the gestalt of supernal man. We say this in the Haftarah of Shavuos, of course, of the Merkavas Yecheskel's chariot. The image that's on the chair, Dmus Kemare Odom, seems to be, the image is like the image of man, looks like a person, Olav Milmaila, that's above on the chair, sitting on the throne. Says Kabbalah and explained the Chassidus Sheheim. This refers to Esses, Sfiros, Datzilas, the 10 emanations of the world of closeness, Atzilut. Sheheim, Kitzir Adam. They appear to be like a human, like a man. Let's learn further. By knowing the details of the faculties of man, and what they mean. It's possible then, after mastering that understanding, to understand godliness, in the upper emanations, the Keser, Chochmah, Bina, Chesed, Geburat, Feres, Netzach, Yesod, Malchus. And belay the protein yonayim by hefrish akloli v'aproti shebin kol sfira. And then you can know the difference of the emanations if you understand yourself better. He gives an example. The difference between all kinds of sfiras. And the specific difference of sfiras. Vasidas protis besug echod, and the specific ones, the categories, right? Chochma bina das, one category, tferes tferes, another category, etc. Ubechlolos ariasfira shelamaylo v'chalokos l'shtei pchinas. They're divided into nechlokos l'shtei pchinas. They're divided into two categories: makifim, encompassing ones, upnimium, and internal ones. Hence the words chavre, makif and pnimi. Right? Are you a makif? Are you living a makif type of life, a superficial type of life? Or are you living pnimi, an inner type of life, where everything you do is drawn towards and expressing pnimiyut? These are three general categories: makifim, two, moichin umidis, mind and emotions, uv'chol sug, right? Moichin umidos. So those are the three. Makifim, moichin, umidos. Makifim, by the way, are what? Will, the willpower, and the pleasure power. Tainug and ratzon. Ratzon and tainug. Moichin is the seichel, and midos are the emotions. Uv'chol sug, in kol svira chaluka me'asvira hashniya shebesug zeh. And within every category, the emanations are different within the category itself. Although they're all grouped in one category, i.e. intellect, nevertheless, each detail, Chochma is Chochma different than Bina, Bina is different than Das, etc. The lezel bavacha besfiras hameichin chalukim besfiras hamakifim besfiras hamidus. Not only is intellect different in the encompassing sphero emanations, i.e., willpower, right? Willpower is consistent and throughout the entire body. Yes, Moshe.
I'm sorry, just wanted to ask you a few lines back. I'm sorry, just go back to makifim upnimim.
Yes.
I want to ask again. I didn't quite catch that. What the difference is between the two?
Okay, so he says 2 lines later, the difference is makifim is willpower and pleasure don't have. He doesn't actually. You're right. He doesn't say it. I need to explain it. Willpower and pleasure doesn't have one specific abode in the body that you say this is its home. Where is willpower? Anywhere, everywhere, if you want. If your pinky wants to move itself, it moves. If your hand wants to play music on a violin or an instrument, it does so. If your mind wants to understand something, so willpower is a faculty that's throughout the entire body, but it doesn't have a home. It's all over. So therefore, we call that makif. It encompasses. Whereas seichel, where's seichel? Is there seichel in the heart? No. Is there seichel in the feet? No. The place for seichel is the brain. So seichel is already a pnimi. Pnimi means it's inside. It has a container. It's here and not there. So when you access your willpower will prompt your mind to understand something better and your feelings to feel something better. So there is, in other words, there's virtues and to each, to makim and pnimi. He's not talking about that right now. We'll see if he does. But basically, that's the difference between makifim and pnimium. Do you follow or not?
Not sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to give you homework. Please read up in the series, Chabad Heritage series. Almost every volume probably has a footnote that gives good English explanations to these things. And I would encourage you to look there. Hopefully it'll be clearer. Let's continue. So he says, Eloi, so the difference, he's saying the differences are not only in the general categories between the three, between the makifim, mochin, and midos, but within each category itself, there are differences. Vahainu, the laser not only is the category of intellect different than the category of the encompassing ones, and the category of the emotions. Within themselves, their lights, technically, their oros, and their kalim, and their vessels, meaning the emanation and the receptacle to receive the emanation, are different. It says there are three halal. You know, the halal is a hallow, like shehem shlosha chadarim. A cavity. Okay. But it means, let's see what it means. Shehem shlosha chadarim b'yuchadim. There are three specific chambers, bigulgolas, in the skull, ha'adam, in man's skull. Shekol cholo v'cholo nimtza moyach miyuchad. In each cavity, there finds itself a specific brain part. She mishtane be'inyan chamroi, that changes, that when used, its material makeup changes. Okay, so scientists here, what we're saying here, Yaini, is like this: that each part of the brain has, Issa, your doctor has a material, and depending on if it's chokhmah, bina, das, in other words, if it's the creativity part of your brain that's being used, or your analytical part of the brain being used, or your concentration part of the brain, that's how the chaymer is comprised of. The chaymer, the physical, we're not scientists and we're not brain surgeons, but that's what he says here. And it's not his chiddush, it's brought in chassidus. That the actual material of the brain, I think there's a whole study today called neuroscience, and where they talk about these things, and I believe that this is some of what the Rebbe is alluding to over here. The point being, he's showing us that the differences between the spheros is one that also impacts the chaymer, the actual material of that part of the brain. Does that coincide with your understanding of the brain? I don't hear you. Okay? Don't hear you. Okay, weiter. And he gives an example. Avram, Simcha, listen to this. The mezigas koyach ha-chochma hu kar v'lach. The power, the faculty of chochma, of what we translate as wisdom, but again, Yoni, what's the Chabad meaning of chochma? Creativity. That part of the brain is kar, cold, v'lach, and moist. Umezigas moyach hamigda, and the makeup of that part of the brain that's associated with bina, hucham v'yovish. It's hot, warm, and dry. V'chein mishtanim basichlim shelehem. And the Rebbe says, so, depending on what part of seichel is being used, and the manner it's being used, that's the difference between it tapping into either the moist part of the brain, the wet part of the brain, or the dry part of the brain. Now we go on to page 11 as an example. Using that as an example, we can understand better. It's in regard to the spheres above. And although most of the spheres, they come one from the other, nevertheless, they're different. And the difference between the spheres, the emanations, are also different in the way they result from a previous sphere. Because each emanation is miyuchad, is specific to its kind. This is the difference, the specific differences between the spheres. There's another general difference between the emanations. Okay. Until now, he discussed differences within the emanations themselves. Chokhmah versus Bina, cold versus warm, and all that. Now he says the placement, the arena, in where the spheros express themselves make also a difference. So, for example, here we are, each one of us. We've been learning together, bringing together, talking together. Now, if we were all uprooted and planted elsewhere with other types of people, let's say we would go to the Amazon out in Brazil, or we would go to the jungles in North Africa. That placement, the fact that we end up elsewhere and it's not what we're used to, would make an impact on our expression. And I use the word expression because we learned already earlier in different places, the essence of a person remains the same. The essence isn't changing because you live in Eretz Yisrael today, okay? Whoever you were in Chicago, Moshe, as, you know, that's really who you are, and it's been enhanced and improved and refined. And, but the Etzem HaAdam is the same. The Etzem. The manifestation of the essence, the dressing up of and that's very important. But, you know, people run away to the other side of the world, right? They think the grass is greener elsewhere. And what do you find out? The same issues come back to haunt you. It's not now. It's not in Brooklyn, so it's in Chicago. It's not in Chicago, so it's in Bet Shemesh. It's not in Bet Shemesh, so it's in North Africa. You can't run away from yourself. You can run away from others, but you can't run away from yourself. So the Rebbe says here that the spheros are not. We're not talking about the etzem now. We're talking about the essence. We're talking about the emanations. The emanations are impacted by the community they're in. So I teach you a certain way. Now I'm going now down to North Miami with different types of students. So I'll be teaching similar Maimorim. Could be I'll have to package it differently for them. Why? Because they're different people living in a different place and used to different types of things. So the cultures of the spheros makes a difference. The Rebbe doesn't say these words in the Maamar, but he does say it clearly. He says it in a different way. He says the difference in the spheros also depends on which olam they're in. Are they Avram? Are they spheros? Are they emanations in the world of Atzilut, in the world of Bria, in the world of Yitzirah, or the world of Asiyah? Right? Where are they manifesting themselves? Okay? Let's continue. You can't compare the 10 emanations the way they are in the world of action compared to the world of formation, of image. You can't compare the two. Again, it goes further. You can't compare. He's saying one to the other, you can't compare. The name of the 10 spheres don't change. Chabad, Chagas, Nehi, Das, Chesed, all the names are common in every world, in every plateau, in every domain. Right? Mikolmak, and nevertheless, he says, Hariyim Chalukas be'etzem uhusam, they're different. The chol zeh moving, shuhu, bekoichas ha'nefesh ha'mashtalshus b'sfiras el yonis. All this is possible. These differences, because we're talking about the faculties of the soul. The koichas ha'nefesh, the faculties, because they themselves are divided into two categories. Makifim, the encompassing ones, like we said before, willpower and pleasure. Upnimiyim, and the inner one, meaning the ones that have an abode, i.e. intellect and emotions. And therefore we divide them into three general categories mentioned earlier. Bakifim, the encompassing one, Moichin, the intellect, Umidos, and the emotions. And now here he mentions, Moshe, you asked, here he mentions what the encompassing ones are. The oineg, this is page 11, about 10 lines down. The oineg, pleasure, verotzoin, and willpower. Heim koiches makifim, they're encompassing faculties. She'ein lohem evorim miyuchadim, they don't have specific limbs, liyos kelim aleim, which are their receptacles. Ela shehem nimtsoyim b'chol evorim b'shava, they're equally found throughout. So where do the differences begin? From the perspective of the receptacles, the limbs, vinyonim, and their shebehem is gala. In other words, like this: willpower is willpower, right? But the willpower of the mind and the willpower of the heart express willpower in two different ways. So who is making the difference in the willpower? Only the keli, the place that it expresses itself in. But the nucleus or the energy that's being expressed is the same. In other words, if willpower is operative, Simcha, listen, if willpower is operative, it makes no difference it makes no difference where it's operative. It makes no difference that it's operative. What the difference is where it's operative. Is it operative in the head, in the heart, in the feet, in the hands? That there are differences. But the Nakuda, it's the same willpower. So when you see Yonason, when you see a child express willpower, and you say this child doesn't have yet the intellectual capacity to understand the importance of the idea, and yet you see this child is trying and determined and persevering because willpower is operative now. And that willpower that's operative now is similar to the willpower of the great intellect who's working very hard to express a deep idea that he or she has. Yes, Yoni. Yes, Yoni.
So from what I understood, from what you just said, when you're talking about willpower, you're talking about when it's from the heart or from the brain. Are you talking about also, especially you just brought up a child, the impulsivity of the human psyche? Like, we have an impulse, we see cholent, we want to eat the cholent, right? So is it, does the willpower come before the intellect, or the intellect comes before the willpower? Is that the nakuda?
Yeah, yes. meaning to say, the question is, and this Hillel's not here, our local psychologist. Impulsivity, is that willpower? You know, I would stop right there and analyze. And is impulsivity willpower? I'm not sure it is. Impulsivity, I don't know. That has to be looked at. Isser, would you agree or disagree? No, I can't hear him today.
Rabbi Delvin, Isser's microphone, I guess, is not working.
Anyway, so Yaini, but overall, overall, that's correct. Ratzon, willpower drives man. Because again, this child doesn't have an understanding about most things, and yet is driven. Where is it coming from? From the Ratzon. An adult who has an understanding, that's where you say, wait a minute, what's triggering that drive? The understanding or the willpower? So Chassidus B'derech, generally speaking, and he says that it's the willpower, the koiches makifim sheba adam, that is the impetus for the intellect. That's why I say to you, yes. What time is it, please? I don't have a watch right now.
3:17.
Okay, we'll stop here. It's a little heavy, but that's the idea of learning Chassidus. We got to learn it all. And
Fantastic.
and
This is fantastic.
yeah, and when you break it down, so I'm glad what you said, Moshe, and I'm glad that you said, Yoini. When you break it down, it becomes more meaningful. Avram, were things clear today for you?
Yes, somewhat. I don't probably rewatch the video
Okay.
second time.
Yeah, I went a little fast in the text because we could get bogged down. But the idea is basically the makifim, as Moshe said, pointed out, the willpower and pleasure versus intellect. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see everyone tomorrow. Zaygas and Shalom. Bye bye.
Thank you very much.
Take care.